Hi, I'm Teresa, and I'm going to be presenting some of the main findings from our case study on unintended biases in robot social behavior. Now, the impact of AI in our societies gets more and more apparent every single day. Methods like Stable Diffusion are bringing forth conversations about artistic ownership and copyright. ChatGPT is revolutionizing how students do their homework and forcing conferences to update their guidelines. In this work, we bring forth yet another example of how we're failing to catch up with all the potential impacts of technological developments. A story about how biases can so easily, inadvertently, get baked into the systems we're developing and why we should talk more about this. So in prior work, we set out to investigate the role of a robot in a rubber duck debugging session. This concept encompasses the idea that a rubber duck can assist the process of debugging a program by serving as a listener when a person explains the code aloud step by step. We wanted to evaluate the effects of replacing the rubber duck, an unresponsive listener, with an attentive listening robot in a think aloud problem solving session. Just to note that we won't focus too much on the results from this study, but please read the release preprint if you're interested. So the participants would speak to a fur-hat robot, which displayed one of two possible listener behaviors. The naive listening robot had its listening behavior generated by handcrafted heuristics, whereas the data-driven listening robot had its behavior learned through a deep learning model trained on a corpus of human-human conversational data. The listening actions included were simple and consisted of backchannels, which we use to signal attentiveness when listening to someone talk. The robot could either nod, emit a vocal back channel, or do both simultaneously.
Because yeah, if you look at the yeah.
So we ran a study with 101 participants. During the problem-solving sessions, and even without paying too much attention to the participant's speech, an intuition arose. The robot seemed to be behaving differently if the participant identified as a male than if they identified as a female. We almost did not look further into this. I mean, surely it was just a hunch. Well, it wasn't. Indeed, if we looked at the frequency of back channels per minute, the differences were clear. The robot was back channeling more if the participant were a male. However, interestingly, the perception of the robot did not change. When looking at how participants rated the robot in terms of its listening behavior and how it came across, gender was not a predictor. This finding can be made part of a bigger conversation on social expectations contingent on gender. So we wanted to further investigate the causes of this biased behavior. The naive listening condition is based on a set of rules proposed by Ward and Tsukahara. These rules are cumulative and determine when a back channel should be emitted, with the main contributor being the pitch of the voice of the participant. When looking at data collecting during the study, we note that male participants were triggering back channels more because their speech was more likely to produce low pitch regions that were also longer. Now, the data-driven listening condition was not as trivial to debug. The model learns from a 34-dimensional feature array based on a number of audio and pitch features. To visualize this feature space, we collapsed the data collected during our study into 2 dimensions through principal component analysis. We can see from the figure that while the feature spaces overlap, their distribution is different. But there was one piece left in the puzzle, and we found it by looking at the training data. Now, to train a deep learning model for a listener that could adjust to different tasks, we looked for corpora of unscripted, non-topic bounded interactions that were publicly available. When writing this work, we took the time to compile gender distributions of some of the most popular datasets, and the imbalance is clear. Notably, Warden Tsukahara's heuristic that was used to extract the rules was made up of 12 participants, 10 of them male. And for the data-driven model, we used Cardiff's conversational database, which is made up of conversations between 16 different speakers. However, to train our own model, we used a subset of this data, which was better annotated, and it was made up of 6 participants, all of them male. So as we can see, including from our own research practices, data sets are often imbalanced in terms of gender of participants. This signals that researchers may not be putting demographic diversity at the forefront of their data collection and design choices. Whether or not they should might be a discussion contingent on the application context. Either way, it should be a discussion. So the present work focuses on a post-hoc exploration of the causes of bias in robot social behavior. Backchanneling behavior in casual social interaction with a healthy neurotypical adult population may not seem like a high-stakes setting for biases, but in general, post-hoc identification of biases can have potentially devastating consequences. Failure to recognize this bias by participants identifies the risk of biased behaviors going unnoticed or unquestioned, not only by participants, but also by researchers who might look at such lack of differences as evidence that the robot worked equally well for everyone. Our own failure to prevent the biases came as an unpleasant surprise and made us wonder what we could have done differently. The observed differences in robot behaviors are without a doubt unacceptable, but it remains unclear how the robots should behave instead. We see three contrasting approaches that can be taken to develop, hopefully, more fair, data-driven robot social behaviors. We can either reproduce the differences observed in human-human interactions, thus propagating existent biases, attempt to create and to treat users of all gender identities exactly equally, that is, diluting gender differences, or applying the concept of algorithm reparation to overcompensate for those differences observed in human-human interactions. For now, there are no clear right or wrong answers. Rather, we need to bring forth these discussions and extensively study how to best design behaviors in order to achieve interaction goals in a fair, safe way. For our rubber duck study, we followed every research good practice in the books, yet we still effed up. This calls for a review of good practices in order to include measures that may prevent such biases from going unchecked. We advanced with some preventative measures. We should carefully examine the dataset and consider reducing or recollecting data in order to form a pool of gender diverse participants. We should test developed behaviors online and offline while being sensitive to pilot testers and their impressions of robot behavior across people of different identities. Here we explored only gender, but this requires an intersectional approach. Quantifying behavior by running pilot studies and performing online evaluations on a dataset to objectively observe the robot behavior towards participants of different identities. And building on what was mentioned before, avoid the over-reliance on perceptual measures regarding robot behavior only. Make sure to compare objective measures of robot behavior to identify differences that may not register during user studies. So we hope to contribute to the growing body of research that investigate these questions and would be happy to discuss with anyone that is interested. Thank you so much.